Hey photographers, it's Ben from TAFE. How are you today? Video. It's a big one. We're not going to cover it all in this chat. What we can do though is give you a brief introduction to some of the fun you can have and talk about a couple of key points that I try to keep in the back of my head when I'm out shooting a bit of video on my DSLR or mirrorless camera. I'm not going to lie to you, it was the first time I shot a video for the newspaper. I was a little bit petrified, okay? And that video wasn't very good. However, the second video I made was a lot better. And then the third was actually kind of getting there. Sort of incrementally, you will get better. This assessment is designed to just be a taster to video. So don't feel as though you've got to read through all this stuff and then be an expert. I do want you to have a killer crack at it though and produce the best about 1 minute long clip of multimedia you can. I've written these down so I don't muck them up. There's a couple of things I like to keep in my head when I'm shooting video. The first is shutter speed, and there'll be a resource that gets more into this, but basically if you want a shutter speed that suits 90% of video, pick about a 50th of a second. 1/50th of a second. And that will sort of deal with 90% of your video needs, particularly in this sort of pretty gentle environment. We're not shooting sport or anything super hectic. Why 1/50th of a second? Let me just get a little bit into the back end of video. With video, or when you're watching a movie at the cinema, there's variances, but basically you're looking at footage that is one photo after another really quickly and at a speed of one photo every 30th of a second. So for every 1 second of movie or TV you see, you've just seen 30 photos fly past your eye. Yeah, so motion picture. 30 pictures in a row, played one after another, quickly, is a second of video. Cool, so that's the idea of motion picture. So what's happening in your camera is while you're recording a video, depending on the frame rate, which is the speed at which your camera is capturing video, which is different to the shutter speed, but anyway, basically, if your frame rate's set to like 30 frames per second video capture, which is pretty much the default on most cameras, what your camera is doing is exposing shots at a desired shutter speed 30 times a second. So if you record a video for 2 seconds, your camera's effectively taken 60 photos. Alright, so obviously if you need to take 30 shots in a second, the lowest shutter speed you can hit is 1/30th of a second. If you shoot your shutter any lower than that, your video is going to be jerky. It's not going to be smooth as it goes from frame to frame, and when a viewer's looking at it, something's going to be wrong. They're going to be looking at it going, this is weird. Alright, so you can expose your frames as fast as you want, depending on your camera and the light. The trouble is if you go too fast and you expose, say, at 1,000th of a second, what you can find is, because those frames are so crystal sharp, when the video is played back, it looks a little bit jerky, and that's cool sometimes for an artistic effect, but generally my experience is if you expose your shutter at a 50th of a second or something that's fairly low, if someone's moving like this, these frames, when you freeze them, they're going to be a little bit blurry. And that blur helps lead one picture into the next picture, so it's all fluid and it looks nice when you're reviewing the footage. Cool, so shutter speed, the upshot from that, 50th of a second, you're going to be fine. Of course, if you're at a 50th of a second and things are looking too bright, what you're going to do is use your aperture to close down your aperture, so go from like f2 to f5.6 to f8 to control your light level there. So, and that's going to naturally affect the area of focus, which is my third dot point. So cameras are getting better. Mirrorless ones kick a lot of butt with this, but some of the DSLRs are still a bit sluggish. When you're recording video and if you want to change focus, say if you've got a shot of a suave, handsome photography teacher, and then you want to pull focus to the computer screen behind me, if you require that, if you push that responsibility, if you ask the camera to do that with its autofocus, it's going to struggle. It'll probably hunt, it'll move slowly, and it'll be a pain. So you're probably going to want to do that manually by whacking your camera into manual focus and then watching the back of your LCD screen as you move the focus from here to out back there. Manual focus and keeping a good eye on the screen, or better yet, shooting in such a way that you don't mess with the focus during the shots. Stability. I'm recording this on a tripod. Tripods are good for keeping footage level. Okay, if it's jerky, if it moves up and down a lot, it's not fun for the viewer. You can sort of teach yourselves techniques to steady your camera, or run and gun sort of things where you can get some mounts that sort of, you know, keep the camera level while you run. But basically for your purposes, so I've got a student at the door. Basically for your purposes, you're going to be looking at just keeping it steady on a tripod, and that'll get you through nice. My last dot point is story. Story is the big thing in video. You want to tell a bit of a story. You want to have something to say. It doesn't have to be huge, but you want to sort of take your viewer along somewhere, because if you take them somewhere, they're not going to be bored. So a story doesn't have to be huge. You can go out and cover a local event that's happening. I'd suggest just covering something small. It might be filming the steps to baking a cake, or interviewing your grandfather about that lawn bowls tournament he won back in 1965, and then adding some layers in post-production to make that more appealing. You might, a couple of shots, you know, if we stick with the grandfather thing, you might have some file footage of him bowling that amazing shot. Then you might have grandfather sitting there in his armchair telling the story of that magical moment where he totally blew away the opposition. And then, you know, you could overlay some photos of him looking suave out the window, a couple more shots of him working in the garden or walking around, going to the mailbox, or, I don't know, playing bingo. Just layer up a couple of things, and then you'll be find yourself at roughly about a minute of footage. Once you've got your minute of footage, you're going to want to edit it. I can't speak highly enough of the basic editors that come with computers these days. I am an iMovie nut. I love it. I've taught courses at TAFE about iMovie because I think it's just the business. That's the Mac thing. I've heard Windows Movie Maker is quite good too. Lots of basic stuff built in there. GoPro, the little camera mob, they do free software which you can chase up and download, and that's a pretty handy editor too. I like, you know, just keep it nice and simple, and as you'll see in the resources, there's plenty of videos where transitions are just change from clip to clip without a lot of fuss, photos and a little bit of, you know, audio over the top is cool too. Don't think you're alone on this assessment. I am on the phone, I'm on the email, and whatever else we do to keep in contact. There's going to be a bunch of Linda resources further down. Watch these videos, get it online, and just know we're shooting something really nice and simple and basic that's going to be effective, okay? I think a lot of people, when they start on video, they think it's got to be this big and it's got to have a lot of layers and a lot of shots. It doesn't. It's got to be nice, it's got to be simple, and it's got to tell a nice story. It doesn't have to tell a story that changes the world, but it's just got to be something that's kind of interesting and cool and makes you go, ah, at the end. And I'm really looking forward to hearing and seeing your work.